Jacksonville 911.
Yes, sir. Hi. This is. I went out to play this afternoon. I thought she was with her, and now she's missing.
How old is she?
She's 8 years old.
Where was she playing at around the house?
Right around the house here.
Is she a white female or a black
Yes,
female?
she's a white female.
What did she have on when she left?
She had on a red T-shirt. And, Mama, did you have on jeans? No, I've been upstairs, Mama. I have searched.
Ma'am?
Yes.
Blue jeans?
Mama, did you have on blue jeans? What'd you have on? What kind of shorts?
Pair of shorts?
She had on a pair of shorts and a red T-shirt.
She blonde hair, black
No,
hair?
she's got reddish-brown hair. It's actually a brown with an auburn tint to it.
What's her name?
It's short. Her name is Maddie. She goes as Madeline.
What's her last name?
Clifton. C-L-I-F as in Frank, T-O-N.
When's the last time anybody saw her?
Mama, what time did I come home from boating? About 5:30?
About 5.
4:30 to 5 o'clock. About 5:30 was the last time we saw her. And I was letting the kids play out here for a little while, and then she disappeared, and nobody knows where she's at.
Does she have any friends nearby? Did you go check?
I got every neighbor out here right now.
Okay, the police will be there shortly, ma'am. You keep looking, okay?
Okay.
That was the mother of 8-year-old Maddie, who mysteriously disappeared in November 1998. At that moment, her worst fears were just that, fears. She didn't know at the time that the worst possible thing that could be done to her lovely daughter had already happened. Someone she trusted most, her best friend, had already taken Maddie away forever. And the person who ended her little life not only killed her, but he kept it a secret in the darkest way imaginable. He hid Maddie's body right under his bed, where it would remain hidden for a whole week. 7 long days, and all the while, her family was clinging to hope, searching, waiting for any news. But the truth was hiding in the shadows, under the very roof of someone they thought was a friend. Joshua and Maddie were buddies in the same neighborhood. Joshua was born in Allentown, Pennsylvania in 1984. That's to say he was much older than Maddie. Now, Joshua's life was far from easy. His dad battled serious addiction issues and was pretty rough around the edges. This guy was tough, not in a positive way. He was always on edge, making life difficult for Joshua and his mom. They were living in constant fear, never really feeling safe in their own home. Steve was super strict and pretty bizarre with his rules. He had this thing about not letting Joshua have friends over unless he was around, and he especially didn't like it when girls came over. Even Joshua's mom could never figure out why. Because of all this chaos, Steve eventually decided to pack up the family and move to Florida, leaving Joshua's half-brothers behind in Pennsylvania. The family fell apart, and they suddenly had to say goodbye to their brothers and start over somewhere new. Now, it's November 1998. Joshua's 14 and living in Jacksonville, Florida. To the outside world, he seemed like a regular kid. Neighbors would tell you he was quiet but friendly. A normal, charming young guy. Clifton's mom, Sheila, would say the same. Her daughter and Joshua were just normal friends, and she never thought twice about them. There were no warning signs, no history of trouble with the law, or anything violent. His teacher even said that he was well liked at school, just a fun, silly kid. But things weren't always as they seemed. Behind that quiet, friendly face was a storm brewing, a story so unexpected that it would shock everyone who thought they knew the real Joshua. That's the thing with secrets. They have a way of coming out when you least expect them. And for Joshua, those hidden truths were about to surface in a way no one could have ever predicted. It was just a normal day on November 3rd, 1998. or so it seemed for young Joshua and Maddie Clifton, the girl from across the street. She popped by Joshua's house, just looking for a bit of fun, and asked him to come out and play some baseball. Joshua knew he shouldn't have friends over while his father was out, but hey, what harm could a game of baseball do? So they started playing, tossing the ball back and forth, but then everything changed in a blink. Joshua swung the bat, hit the ball, and bam! It smacked right into Maddie's eye. Blood, tears, and screams filled the air. Maddie was hurt badly, and Joshua, well, he was terrified. His dad would be home any minute, and he knew this wouldn't go down well. Panicked and unsure of what to do, Joshua dragged Maddie inside his house. He was just trying to think of a way to stop her screams and keep this accident quiet until he could figure out a solution. As he pulled her in, her clothes got tangled, and more of them came off than he intended. Desperate to silence her cries, Joshua grabbed the baseball bat again and hit her, hoping she'd just quiet down. He shoved her under his bed, thinking maybe, just maybe, he could hide this until he figured out what to do next. When his dad, Steve, came home, Joshua had to act normal. They talked for a bit, nothing out of the ordinary. But the whole time, Joshua's mind was racing, and his heart was pounding. He sneaked back to his room later, only to find Maddie was still alive, making sounds under his bed. Overcome by panic and fear, he did the unthinkable. He took a Leatherman tool, cut her throat, and stabbed her repeatedly. It was brutal. It was final. Maddie was gone. The clock ticked on that day, and soon it was 5 p.m. Maddie was reported missing. The whole community sprang into action. Police, neighbors, volunteers. Everyone was out searching, including Joshua. Can you imagine? He was out there, searching for a girl he knew was lying dead under his bed. That whole week, Joshua was living in a state of denial, in a fantasy world where he hadn't done something so horrifying. He'd later say that this was his way of coping, of blocking out the reality of what he'd done, just pretending everything was okay. From the initial stage, the investigation zeroed in on Maddie's neighborhood. It was a tight-knit community, just 2 streets wide, where everyone thought they were safe. Just moments before her world turned upside down and her parents reported her missing, Maddie was last seen there. For an entire week, the local police were all over the place. They staked out the area day and night, not missing a beat. Officers knocked on doors and peered into backyards, searching for any sign of Maddie. Meanwhile, the community rallied together in a big way. Hundreds of volunteers stepped up, spreading out through thick woods and murky swamps. They combed every inch of the ground, pushing through brambles and mud, determined to find any clues that could lead them to Maddie. They plastered the neighborhood with flyers. Everywhere you looked, there was Maddie's face, on lampposts, in shop windows, even on hats and t-shirts. Her image blanketed the town, a constant reminder of the urgent search. The community's heart was on display, with everyone from toddlers to grandparents joining in the effort. Next, a whopping $100,000 reward was put up, hoping to encourage anyone with the smallest piece of information to come forward. On the very first night of the search, Joshua Poston, a local teenager, was right there with the volunteers, flashlight in hand, calling out Maddie's name into the darkness. It added drama to see someone so young and involved, hoping against hope alongside seasoned searchers. But there was another figure who caught the police's eye, Mr. Grisham. Known around the neighborhood for being the friendly guy who played games with the kids, he suddenly found himself under the microscope. Earlier in the day, Maddie disappeared, and he had been out hitting golf balls with her. It was just a normal afternoon, or so it seemed. Mr. Grisham told the police that Maddie had left to fetch more balls from her house. When she didn't come back, he figured maybe her parents had called her in. Little did he know that assumption would throw him into the heart of a major investigation. Despite his casual interactions with the children, his past wasn't as clear-cut. Mr. Grisham had a criminal record, which didn't do him any favors now. The police grilled him, trying to figure out whether this friendly neighbor could have a darker side. But through it all, Mr. Grisham cooperated, maintaining his innocence, shaken but steadfast in his version of the events. This case isn't just about a tragic day. It's about the terrifying depths of fear and the desperate actions it can drive a person to. It's a stark reminder of how quickly things can spiral out of control, how a moment of panic can turn into a nightmare. And through it all, Joshua was just a kid, caught up in a horrific chain of events, trapped in a fantasy world of his own making, unable to face the grim reality of his actions. All right, fast forward to November 10th, a week after that tragic game of baseball. Melissa Phillips, Joshua's mom, walked into his room for a bit of cleaning. But this wasn't just any ordinary day of tidying up. As she moved around the room, something caught her eye, a wet spot on the floor. That's strange, she thought. Curiosity turned into concern real quick. She started looking around more thoroughly, and that's when she made a horrifying discovery. The lifeless body of Maddie Clifton was hidden away. Imagine the shock, the absolute horror. Without a second thought, Melissa ran out of the house and did the only thing she could think of. She called the cops. Later that day, the police went straight to Joshua's school. They picked him up and brought him in for questioning. It didn't take long, just a few hours, and Joshua cracked. He confessed to the killing. Just like that, this ordinary kid from the neighborhood admitted to something unimaginable. Still, the prosecutors weren't buying Joshua's story, not all of it at least. Harry Shorstein, the state attorney, hinted that there might have been more to it. He suggested that maybe, just maybe, this crime had a darker motive. He pointed out that Joshua had been talking about some fairly adult stuff with Maddie and her older sister, Jessie. What was that about? Then there's the autopsy. Despite the relief of finding no signs of sexual assault, it only raised more questions. The prosecutors dug in their heels. They argued that the whole scene didn't add up to Joshua's account. Maddie's clothes were supposedly pulled off as Joshua dragged her, yet there wasn't any dirt or sand on her body, nothing that would suggest she'd been dragged across the ground at all. And another thing, there's no blood in the backyard, no blood on the baseball either. Remember, Joshua said he accidentally hit Maddie with that baseball. If that was true, where was the blood? The absence of these crucial pieces of evidence made the prosecutors more skeptical. They thought Joshua's version of the story was missing some pieces, or maybe it was a completely different story altogether. What really happened that day? Was it a tragic accident that spiraled out of control, or was there something more sinister at play? Everyone wanted answers, but it seemed like every answer only led to more questions. It was a puzzle, a dark and tragic puzzle that left a community reeling, trying to make sense of a senseless act. So, when it came time for Joshua's trial, it was a big deal. So big that they had to move it out of Duval County all the way to Polk County. Everyone was talking about it, and with all eyes on Jacksonville, they couldn't just risk a biased jury. Joshua was just a kid, but they charged him as an adult. This was the real deal. Now, his lawyer, Richard D. Nichols, had a plan. Nichols didn't bring a single witness to defend Joshua, not one. It left a lot of people scratching their heads. Even the prosecutors thought it was a wild move. Instead of calling witnesses, Nichols was banking everything on his closing argument. He was going to tell the jury that what happened to Maddie wasn't cold-blooded murder, but a tragic accident that spiraled out of control. A moment of panic that bordered on madness. And when Joshua was sitting in jail, waiting for his trial, his lawyer didn't go over the case with him and didn't prepare him for what was coming. No, they played chess. Meanwhile, Joshua's mom, Melissa, wasn't on board with this strategy at all. She thought it was a mistake not to let Joshua speak up, tell his side of things. But Joshua's dad, Steve, trusted the lawyer. He believed the lawyer was well versed in his practice, so they proceeded accordingly. Strangely enough, Joshua never got to tell his story in court. The trial kicked off on July 6, 1999, and it was almost over as soon as it began, just 2 days. The jury didn't need much time to think it over. Just a couple of hours later, they found Joshua guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict was life in prison with no chance of getting out. He was too young for the death penalty, but still, life without parole.
I'm happy. I think it's justice for Maddie and for my family, and I'm so thankful for Bernie and the state attorney's office.
During the trial, there was this moment where the defense tried to show some brain scans. They had these images that supposedly showed damage in Joshua's frontal lobe. That's the part that deals with panic and judgment. They wanted to say the kid's brain wasn't working right, but the prosecution had their own bombshell. They found stuff on Joshua's computer, some pretty rough pornography that they wanted to bring up. But the judge wasn't having any of it. He ruled all that stuff out. There were no brain scans or computer evidence, just the facts of the case straight up. And as a side note to this story, just a year after Joshua's trial, his dad, Steve, the man whose shadow loomed large over his early life, died in a car accident. Sentenced to a life behind bars, Joshua didn't just settle into the monotony of prison life. Instead, he looked for ways to grow and make amends, even in a place as grim as prison. Now, when he was in jail, and in 2008, he faced a question: to write a letter of apology to Maddie Clifton's family. But Joshua felt that a letter wouldn't cut it. He believed they deserved more: the chance to see his remorse face to face, to feel the sincerity of his apology, something he doubted could ever come through just in written words. Maddie's mother, though, wanted none of it. She said she had no interest in any form of communication with him. That door, it seems, is firmly closed.
Apology thing, and I'm like, I can't do that. That would be really cheesy. You know what I mean? It just ain't working. I can't do that. Something like that. If I would ever talk to them, it would have to be something personal. They deserve to hear it from me in person. If it's going to be something like that, you know what I mean? It has to be me there, and I have, so they can see the sincerity. They won't be able to see it in a letter, you know what I mean? They won't be able to see it through a phone call, or they won't be able to see it while I'm on TV with them or something, you know what I mean? They have to see it in person. If they saw me talk to them, they would see it. They wouldn't have a doubt in their mind,
Starting off, Joshua had a knack for learning. He wanted to complete his General Education Development Test, GED for short, but was initially told he was too young. Still, he pushed for it and got it done. From there, he didn't just stop with high school level education. He went on to take college courses by correspondence. He also turned to helping others too. He trained as a paralegal and started helping other inmates with their appeals. And he tutors them too, sharing his knowledge and helping them get their own GEDs. Music and spirituality have also become big parts of his life. He plays guitar in a prison band, strumming chords and writing songs that probably help him escape the bars around him, if only for a moment. In 2017, during an appeal, even the prosecution had to admit something striking. Joshua had turned himself into a model prisoner. So, when Joshua was just 14, he was slapped with a life sentence without the possibility of parole. A heavy, heavy sentence for someone so young. Over time, even some of those who had pushed for this sentence began to question if maybe it was too much. Sheriff Nat Glover, a key figure back then, really got people thinking when he said in 2008 that even many people thought that sentence was fair, but according to him, that was a tough call for a kid. It didn't seem like Joshua was out to do evil. It was more like a spur-of-the-moment thing that, in another life, wouldn't have happened at all. The legal battles started heating up in 2002 when the Florida 2nd District Court of Appeal upheld Joshua's conviction. Fast forward to 2004, and Joshua's mom, Melissa, was out there, fighting tooth and nail, trying to get her son a new trial. She argued that his young age at the time should have been a bigger factor in his sentencing. Then, in 2005, the Supreme Court of Florida decided they'd have a look into the possibility of a new trial, setting a hearing for the end of the year. But the real twist came in 2008. Two big guns, Harry Shorstein and Sheriff Glover, both expressed regrets about the life sentence. Shorstein even said he'd wished he'd offered a plea for second-degree murder, which could have softened the sentencing a bit. He went so far as to voice support for Joshua getting clemency or parole one day. The game changed nationally in 2012 with the Supreme Court of the United States ruling in Miller v. Alabama. The court said you can't just throw a life sentence at juveniles without the possibility of parole. It's just not right. It's unconstitutional. This ruling sparked new hope for Joshua's case, leading his attorneys in 2015 to consider using this decision as a basis to argue for resentencing. And it worked. In September 2016, Joshua's legal team won a big victory. They got him a new sentencing hearing, which was held in mid-2017. At this hearing, though, tensions were high. Maddie Clifton's mother stood firm, requesting that Joshua's original sentence be kept in place. In November 2017, the court resentenced Joshua to life again, but this time with a twist. He'd be eligible for another resentencing in the future, based on how he'd shown he can mature and rehabilitate. Joshua then reached out to the Supreme Court of Florida in 2020, hoping for another chance. Unfortunately for him, they declined to hear his case without giving a reason, as they often do. As of now, 2024, Joshua is still in Cross City Correctional Institution. Each day, another chance to reflect, to change, and to live with his past. And that was the irreversible tragedy that altered many lives. From a moment of panic on a seemingly ordinary day to a lifetime behind bars, this crime story is full of challenges, regrets, and legal twists. It's a sobering reminder of how quickly life can change and the lasting impact of our actions. This case has sparked discussions about juvenile violence, the weight of life sentences for minors, and the potential for redemption and rehabilitation. As Joshua continues to serve his sentence, with possibilities for a reevaluation on the horizon, one thing remains clear. The conversation about justice, punishment, and mercy is far from over. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into a case that has captured the attention of many. We hope it's provided you with insights into not just the legal battle, but also the human elements at play. If you found this case compelling, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We'll continue to bring you detailed, thoughtful examinations of cases just like this one, exploring the stories behind the headlines. So, subscribe, share with friends, and stay tuned for more such videos that look beyond the surface. Thank you for watching.